Harry Markowitz defining risk as standard deviation, variation, volatility, high vol, low vol. I want to, it's a bad market. I want to buy low vol funds. I'm not a believer that volatility is the appropriate measure of risk. When that client who just came in from, let's see, I'm going to guess a firm that probably isn't represented here because we could never get him to talk, from Wells Fargo. So Tim Lynch, we could never get Wells Fargo to talk. That's a story for tomorrow afternoon. Yeah, she did, I remember. So Tim Lynch, ACAT's an account in from Wells Fargo late last year. And 2 weeks ago, yesterday, 5 weeks ago, the client calls and says, Tim, I've been looking at the media. I think things are bad and they're only going to get worse. Sell everything. Now, everyone in this room has had that phone call. Sell everything. And Tim, being the adept financial advisor he is, being that expert portfolio manager he is, says, it's really not a good idea, but you have this European bank ETF that you brought over from Wells. Let's just sell that. And after several back and forth, the gentleman says, okay, Tim, I'll meet you halfway. I'll just sell that. So Tim is using the S&P 500 as his metric. Okay, ignore the stochastics, ignore the moving averages. Those are things I use, but they're not germane to the conversation. Just look at the S&P 500. This is year to date, maybe 10 days ago. As I've been a groupie of Marianne Bartel's for 15 years, she just didn't know it, but as she will probably also say later today, we're still at a resistance level. It's okay, but as you look at the S&P 500, Tim talks this guy into just selling some European ETFs. So that's benchmarked off of this, the MSCI EAFE index. Now, when a similar guy calls Harvey, when that guy who calls and says, Harvey, I want to sell everything, Harvey comes up with the idea, look, the other thing you ACATs over from Wells Fargo is this Chinese climate change fund. Chinese climate, I'm sure there's one, right? There's a fund for everything. So Harvey says, why don't we just sell that instead? And the guy says, okay. So that fund is benchmarked off of the MSCI Emerging Market Index. Now, folks, don't get me started on the fact that why is the second largest economy in the world in the MSCI Emerging Market Index? That's inexplicable to me. That's for the next book, if it still remains that way. So Harvey talks the guy into raising a little bit of cash by selling this Chinese climate fund or something like that instead. Okay, so let's look at something here. This is the MSCI Emerging Market Index this year. This is the MSCI EAFE Index of this year. This is the S&P 500 this year.